There's a moment, quite often unceremonious, when something in your life comes to an end. A relationship loses its rhythm. A dream no longer fits who you are becoming. A version of yourself that you've outgrown quietly steps in the background. And in that moment, whether loud or subtle, there's a deep internal knowing this must end. But here's the truth most people won't say out loud. Ending something is often more difficult than enduring something that's already broken, because we've been conditioned to believe that endurance equals strength. We applaud the ones who hold on no matter what. We romanticize resilience, sometimes to the point of self-betrayal. So we stay. We stay in cycles. We stay in patterns. We stay in identities we've outgrown, in relationships that are bleeding us dry, simply because the discomfort of staying feels more familiar than the uncertainty of ending. But acceptance, real soul deep acceptance, is the first step to healing. You cannot heal from what you continue to deny. You cannot move forward while still pretending that what is clearly ending is somehow salvageable. There's a kind of clarity that only comes when you stop arguing with the truth. Philosophers like Heraclitus taught us that the only constant in life is change. The moment we try to resist that natural current, we create suffering. What was meant to be a transition becomes a trauma, not because it ended, but because we couldn't accept that it had to. Psychologically, this is where many people get stuck. We form emotional attachments not just to people, but to stories, to outcomes, to expectations. We don't mourn the person. We mourn the fantasy of what we hoped they'd be. We don't grieve just the lost job. We grieve the version of ourselves we thought we'd become if we had stayed. But healing requires that we tell ourselves the truth, that some things do not belong in the future we are walking into. And that is not failure, it's alignment. Think of a snake shedding its skin. It does not apologize for the shedding. It does not try to carry the old skin into the new season. It lets the old fall away instinctively because survival and evolution demand it. You too must learn the wisdom of that release. We all love new beginnings, but you cannot have one without an ending. And the ending is what most of us try to skip over. We want the healed version of ourselves without enduring the death of what no longer serves us. But real healing begins with surrender. The kind of surrender that says, this hurts, but I know it's necessary. I don't have to understand all of it yet, but I trust that letting this go is part of letting something better grow. Sometimes life will not give you closure. Sometimes the apology won't come. Sometimes the understanding you crave won't arrive. And in those moments, you must choose your peace over your need to make it make sense. You must choose to close the chapter, not because everything is resolved, but because your soul is ready for the next page. There's a deep kind of strength in saying, this ends here, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with clarity, with calm, with resolve, because letting it end is not giving up. It is, in fact, the beginning of taking your power back. So if you're standing at the edge of something that no longer feels like life, something that no longer expands you, honors you, or speaks to who you're becoming, know this: you are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to let it end. And when you do it with the quiet confidence of someone who knows, endings are not tombstones, they are turning points. After you've let it end, after you've stood in the truth that something is no longer meant to continue, there's this raw space that opens up. A space that many people try to skip over, bypass, or fill too quickly. But that space, that H, is sacred. It's what we call pain. And pain is not something to be feared. It's something to be honored. There's a myth we've swallowed somewhere along the way. That strength means not feeling. That emotional maturity means you move on quickly, smile through it, distract yourself, or pretend you're unaffected. But that's not strength. That's emotional avoidance. And if you avoid the hurt, you delay the healing. Pain is the body's and the soul's way of getting your attention. It is not your enemy. It is a messenger. It rises not just to break you, but to break through you. And unless you're willing to listen to it, to sit with it, to ask it why it's here, you'll find yourself haunted by the very thing you refuse to face. Psychologically, unprocessed pain doesn't disappear. It just buries itself deeper. It hides in your behaviors, your decisions, your relationships. It shows up as anxiety, as detachment, as anger in moments that don't even call for anger. That's what trauma does when it's left unattended. So no, you're not weak because you're hurting. You're human. And if you don't let yourself feel it now, you'll find yourself bleeding on people who didn't cut you later. There's a reason ancient wisdom traditions, spiritual, philosophical, even tribal, made space for mourning. They understood what modern culture often rushes past, that grief is a process, not a pit stop. It's not something to conquer. It's something to move through, slowly, honestly, and without shame. Sometimes you have to let yourself cry without censoring the tears. You have to say, yes, this hurts deeply, and not add a justification to soften it. Not everyone needs to understand why you're grieving. Not everything painful is visible to others. But if it matters to you, then it matters, period. What makes pain feel unbearable is not always the pain itself, but the pressure we put on ourselves to get over it before we've even let it live. We want resurrection without crucifixion. We want the new beginning without the dark night. But you can't skip the night and expect the sunrise to mean something. Some days, healing will look like journaling. Other days, it will look like breaking down in your car. Some days, it will look like saying no when you've spent years saying yes to everything just to feel needed. And some days, it will simply look like getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, and deciding, I'm not okay yet, but I'm not giving up either. Letting it hurt means giving yourself permission to feel everything without judgment. That's where your power actually starts to return. Because the moment you stop pretending you're fine is the moment you start to become whole again. And wholeness is better than perfection. Perfection is a mask. Wholeness is truth. Wholeness means you faced the shadow and didn't run. You looked at the scar, and instead of hiding it, you learned to trace it like a story of survival. There's this paradox that pain teaches us. What we thought would destroy us often reveals us. Not the version of us that's curated or expected, but the real us, the deeper us. The one we forgot existed beneath the layers of performance and protection. So if you're hurting, I want you to know you're not behind, you're not broken, you're not too much. You are becoming, and becoming takes time and fire and sometimes a bit of unraveling. That hurt you feel is not the end of your story. It's the part where everything starts to change. Don't rush your resurrection. Don't resent your pain. Let it speak. Let it sting. Let it say what it needs to say. Because once pain has had its voice, it no longer needs to scream. It no longer needs to control you. It becomes part of your wisdom instead of part of your wound. And that's where healing begins. So let it hurt. Let it teach. Let it show you who you are beneath what you lost. Because pain, when honored, becomes prophecy. After the ending and after the H comes the quiet. It doesn't always announce itself with clarity. Sometimes it tiptoes in like a whisper. Other times it waits patiently until you're too tired to fight, and then it arrives. Not as a fix, but as an invitation. Are you ready to heal? Healing isn't loud. It's not flashy. And contrary to how it's portrayed, healing isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's mundane, unremarkable. It looks like rest. It sounds like silence. It feels like nothing is happening, and yet everything is. Most people think healing is about fixing what's broken, but healing isn't about returning to who you were before the wound. It's about becoming someone stronger because of it. It's not a rewind. It's a redefinition. Psychologically, healing is the brain's way of forming new associations. It's your body releasing stored trauma. It's your nervous system learning how to feel safe again, not just in the world, but in your own skin. You don't always notice it happening in real time because it doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like failure, like fatigue, like why am I still here? But healing is layered, and layered work is slow work. You'll know you're healing not when the pain is gone, but when it no longer drives your decisions. When you stop rehearsing the same story looking for a different ending, when you stop needing closure from them because you found clarity within yourself. And listen, Healing doesn't always come in the way you expect. Sometimes God uses the very things you didn't ask for to bring you the healing you didn't know you needed. A boundary you were afraid to set becomes the catalyst for your growth. A rejection becomes redirection. A silence becomes space for your voice to finally emerge. Philosophically, healing challenges the ego because the ego wants control. It wants revenge, explanation, validation. It wants answers. But healing doesn't promise answers. It offers peace, and peace doesn't always come with clarity, but it always comes with release. You stop needing things to go your way. You start learning to flow with what is. That shift alone can transform your entire life. But here's where most people get stuck. They resist the stillness. Because when everything quiets down, your wounds start speaking louder. The distraction is gone. The noise is gone. And now it's just you, face to face with yourself. But this right here is sacred ground. This is the part of the journey where you stop performing and start confronting. You confront the bitterness you buried, the guilt you carried, the lies you believed about what your pain says about your worth. You start choosing boundaries that protect your peace instead of proving your strength. You learn to say no. You learn to rest without apology. You stop chasing people who made you feel hard to love. You stop explaining your value. And slowly, sometimes painfully, you begin to remember who you were before the pain tried to rewrite your identity. This is what it means to let it heal. You do the invisible work that no one else claps for. You choose wholeness over appearance. You forgive, not always because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You take back the pen and start rewriting the narrative, not from a place of woundedness, but from wisdom. And no, the healing process doesn't always feel holy. Sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back. Like breakdowns in the grocery store and louder that feels foreign because it's been so long. But those moments matter. They're the signs that something inside you is waking up again, that your soul is stretching into new space. So be patient with your progress. Give grace to your grief. Don't compare your timeline to anyone else's highlight reel. Healing isn't a race. It's a reunion with your true self. The self who isn't defined by what happened. The self who is no longer reactive but reflective, no longer afraid to feel, to hope, to try again. If you're in the thick of it right now, if you're healing quietly and perfectly slowly, I want you to know you're not behind. You're right on time. This part matters. This part counts. Even if nobody sees it, even if nobody understands it, because healing doesn't need applause. It just needs your permission. So let it heal, not just the wound, but the way you've learned to live around it. Because there's more ahead than there is behind, and you're worthy of walking into it whole. And think there comes a moment, a real quiet moment. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with closure letters or a final conversation. It comes in a breath where the weight you've been carrying suddenly feels optional. A breath where you realize you've survived the ending, you've honored the pain, and you've done the healing, and now it's time to release what's no longer yours to carry. Let it go. It sounds simple, but it's one of the most misunderstood, most resisted acts of freedom you'll ever step into. Because the truth is, people don't struggle to let go because they're weak. They struggle because they're still trying to make sense of what happened. Still trying to hold on to the story long enough to rewrite it in their favor. Still hoping that if they keep remembering it, they can stop it from hurting. But letting go isn't forgetting. Letting go is choosing peace over proof. It's understanding that your power isn't in changing the past. It's in not letting it control who you become next. You can honor what was and still walk away from it. You can acknowledge the love and still close the door. You can carry the lesson and leave the wound. Philosophically, letting go is the ego's final surrender. It's when you stop trying to control outcomes, stop chasing closure, stop needing to be understood by people who were never meant to see you clearly. The ego wants to win, but the soul wants to be free. And freedom doesn't always come in answers. It comes in release. There's a psychological toll to carrying what's already dead. You don't just carry the memory, you carry the energy, the fear, the resentment, the need to prove something to someone who's no longer watching. And every time you choose not to let go, you quietly rob yourself of the future you're meant to live, the peace you're meant to embody, the relationships you're meant to thrive in. Letting go is not abandonment, it's alignment. It's not denial, it's discernment. But you can't let go until you make peace with what it cost you. That's the part no one talks about. Because there's grief in moving on. There's grief in saying they're not coming back. There's grief in letting the version of yourself that held on to it for so long finally rest. But once that grief is honored, once it's cried out and prayed over and accepted for what it is, there is so much space, so much air, so much clarity. You start to realize that holding on was never keeping you safe. It was just keeping you stuck. You weren't protecting yourself. You were postponing your healing. You were trying to guard against a past that already happened. And here's the miracle of letting go. It doesn't erase what happened, but it reclaims your power from it. You wake up and say, that chapter doesn't get to narrate my story anymore. You stop showing up in rooms with baggage that isn't even yours. You stop letting old disappointments set the standard for new beginnings. You stop settling. You stop shrinking. You stop chasing things that your healed self would never even recognize as worthy. Letting go looks like forgiveness, not because they apologized, but because your peace matters more than your pride. It looks like walking away, not because you're heartless, but because you finally understand that proximity isn't love. It's just presence. And not everyone who's present deserves access. It looks like living fully, loudly, beautifully, without needing permission or proof that you've moved on. Your life becomes the evidence. Your joy becomes the answer. Your peace becomes the closure. And no, it won't always feel like a clean break. Sometimes letting go happens in pieces, in decisions, in small daily choices to think differently, feel differently, speak differently. Sometimes you'll feel the weight creep back in. And when that happens, just remind yourself, I'm not who I was when that happened. And I don't have to carry this anymore. You've done the hard work. You let it end hurt. You let it heal. Now let it go. Not just with your words, but with your walk, with your habits, with your expectations, with your energy. Because what's ahead of you is too important to waste on what's already behind you.